better business, and a better life begin here. Welcome to Business is Art on TrueChat with author and business consultant, Jon Umstead.
Hey, thank you for tuning into Business is Art. We've got a topic today we're going to cover that's kind of building on the last episode of Business is Art, where we talked about various trends that are going on out in the small business world. But today we're going to take that a little bit further and talk about some trends for small business startups for 2019. I know it's April. We're 4 months into the year already, but still, these are some kind of hot trends that are going on in just various industries and types of businesses that entrepreneurs are finding some success in, and critics are saying, hey, we're going to continue to see some success and opportunities in these particular industries and types of businesses. So we wanted to talk about a few of those today. And sitting in with me is Justin T. Weller of TrueChat, co-founder at TrueChat, producer of the Business is Art podcast, as well as host of other shows of his own here at TrueChat. Welcome back, Justin.
Always good to be here, John, and looking forward to discussing some more trends. And this time, I think, some specifics on individual businesses or industries that maybe you're a serial entrepreneur and looking for something new or thinking about new stuff, or maybe you're starting your first business. And these are some ideas out there that are trendy right now.
Right. And to that point, we want to give everyone a little bit of a caution. Just beware here a little bit. Don't go into any of these just because they're, someone says, oh, they're cool, they're trendy, these are hot. Use sources like the ones we're going to share with you today, really to help you brainstorm ideas or to help validate ideas that you already have. But do not start any kind of business that you're not passionate about. And I think Justin and I can both speak directly to that from our own experiences. Wouldn't you say, Justin?
Absolutely. I mean, I think John and I both know that it's a grind, right? Regardless of what kind of business you start. Sometimes it's easier than others. But if you're going to make it through those times where it's difficult and the world feels like it's against you, it's a lot easier to do that if you really love what you're doing. And it's much harder to do it if you don't like what you're doing.
Absolutely. It's a tough road. It requires a lot of energy, a lot of focus. There's a lot of ups and downs, both emotional and financial, as you move along. So, man, if you don't love it, you're going to really hate it. All right. So you might as well just stick with a career with someone else, working for someone else. So you've got to be passionate about it. Don't just do it because it's cool or trendy. All right. So before we do get into this, though, I would like to invite you all to join the discussion. You can reach out to me directly on social media. You can find me on Twitter at Jon Umstead. You can find me pretty easily on LinkedIn, fairly active out there. And you can also go to my business website, plancanvas.net, where you can learn a little bit about the consulting services that I offer, as well as the software that I provide as a service. Plan Canvas itself is a strategy to execution management tool, which just basically means, hey, here's a way that you can digitally define, manage, and execute to your long and short-term strategies. So check that out. But do start a discussion. Would love to hear from you. Love to hear what you think about today's show, what you think about past shows, and what you might like to hear in any future shows. But let's get into this one. All right. So again, we're going to be talking about some trending types of business industry opportunities in the small startup world. So we've got a couple of sources that we're going to rely on here. Justin and I are going to kind of flip between these a little bit, but the three sources that we're looking at are articles at one is at Inc. And the article is entitled 8 Best Industries for Starting a Business in 2019. Another source or two that we might look at as we move along if we have time. One is from The Balance, and the article is called The Best Small Business Opportunities for 2019. And then the third source that you might take a look at is from The Street, and the article is called 24 Ideas for You for Your Next Small Business in 2019. Now, Justin, kind of the funny thing about this is, like everything else, if you put in your search engine, something around relative to this topic, you're going to get all kinds of results, and they just increase in the numbers. 8 industries, 24 ideas, then it goes 60 ideas, 100 ideas, and it just keeps going up and up, and it's just too much.
Yeah, it can be overwhelming, especially and that's one of the things that I think's been great about Business is Art. If you've never started a business before, which is probably the majority of entrepreneurs out there, if you're new to starting businesses, it can be overwhelming all by itself. And then when you're looking, for an idea and you're considering going out on your first time and you see 100, different ideas or 60 ideas or whatever, it all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I want to do this, just because of the sheer amount of information. So hopefully this brings it down a little bit, but it is coming obviously through the filter that Jon and I find to be interesting. So you have to keep that in mind as well.
Yep, absolutely. All right, so let's get into this. We're going to here's what the format's going to be like, folks. We're going to mostly go through this Inc. article, and we're going to look at the 8 industries that they're talking about, because there are a number of different types of businesses that you could start within these industries. The other 2 sources that I mentioned, they get into some specific businesses, and if we have some time, we'll flip to those, and then Justin and I will take turns kind of picking and choosing which ones kind of capture our attention. But we're going to go back and forth. I'll start, I think, Justin, and the first one that this article really talks about is the general business industry of micro mobility. And that's a real nice way to say, hey, little things that get you from one place to another. Right. And, and we're talking about things like electric powered bikes and scooters and skateboards, those sorts of things that are really hot right now. They're hot because, we've got all kinds of social issues that we deal with, global warming, trying to be more energy efficient. We also just have congestion. Anyone that has driven through any, second tier city and up, even some of the smaller cities, getting from one place to another can be quite time consuming and really just generally a pain in the ass, right? You gotta drive, you gotta go through traffic, you gotta find a place to park, and it's what makes Uber and things like that attractive. But the same things that make Uber and other services like that is what makes micro mobility attractive as well.
Yeah, it's one that I've seen an uptick in personally. I mean, especially if you go to certain areas of Columbus right now, which is one of the major metro areas that Jon and I are not far from. There's some areas, especially near the Ohio State University's campus, where these scooters have taken over. And that's, I think, in part because, as Jon said, there's a convenience factor to it. Obviously, it sounds right, like, this can't be that, to pretty much most modern startups sound like, well, there can't be that much to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the practicality is another thing. I remember when I saw these the first time and people explained to me how they worked, and the thinking is, well, you can, if you see one and it's not in use, you can pick it up and use it, using the app, and then you can just take it wherever you want and leave it. And I was thinking about this and I'm like, okay, from a logistics standpoint, how do we make, supply and demand, and how do we make sure they're charged and all of this kind of stuff? So there is definitely a lot that goes into this one, especially the component of you have a lot of physical assets out there in the field. So there's always, whenever that component comes in, there's that separate challenge to it where organizations like TrueChat or Plan Canvas don't have some of those challenges with physical inventory or assets.
Yeah. And you have to take a lot of things into consideration with something like this. For one, can you even use these types of mobility devices in your state or in your city or municipality?
Licensing,
roadway access and things like that. So you have to take that into consideration. There are some big companies out there that are already playing in this space and to your point, leasing out or using or having fleets of mobility devices. So to for an entrepreneur to say, hey, I'm going to start up a business where I'm going to have all of these mobility devices and get them out, and people are going to use them, and I'm going to make all kinds of money. That's probably a pretty tough road for an entrepreneur to hoe, but there are all kinds of ancillary services around it as well. I'm not saying that there's not opportunity there. I'm saying that there could be more opportunity around things like, how do you service these we'll just call them vehicles. How do you service them? Keep them running. Any number of services.
Prevent them
around.
from being stolen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's just a lot, I think, is what John's getting at from the physical side. That doesn't even get to there has to be ease of access from the digital side. The app has to be able to handle, the majority of users' concerns. And the design and distribution of apps all by itself is, I think, more tedious than people realize. To develop a good app, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not that hard, I suppose, to throw something together and get it out there. Speaking from TrueChat's standpoint, having, had an app for quite some time, but to get a really good, high-functioning app that people enjoy using and don't, there's a lot of technology out there that people don't like using. They use it because they have to use it to get to the thing they want. And when you're a company that's based around people have to use an app in order to use your service, it's so important. And I think it can be greatly underestimated that ease of access, the appearance of the app, those can play as much a role as the physical stuff itself. Because if they're not easy, people may never get to using the physical part of your product.
Right. So, speaking of digital and apps and things like that, why don't we go into the next industry? Would you like to introduce it for us, Justin?
You want the next one or the one that, or one that I picked?
Let's take the next one. I think we'll try to get through these 8 in this Inc. article, and then we'll do onesie twosies as we can.
Okay. Yeah, there's a few in here that are interesting, and this next one certainly is digital therapeutics. So this is an emerging field, and video games, for a long time we've heard a lot about some of the health concerns of video games, screen time, that sort of thing. But now these devices, these games, they have the opportunity to provide therapeutic benefits as well. And this is an expanding area. And one of the stats the article shares that I thought was very surprising to me was that you already have Click Therapeutics, which has raised $17 million from pharma, okay, and has been encouraging results in the early trials for apps designed to treat depression and help people quit smoking. So there's a lot of like medications out there, traditional drugs that you see designed to treat things like depression or to help you quit smoking, patches, all that kind of stuff. These are not one of those things that I would have immediately jumped to and said, oh, there's an app for that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's not to say they don't work. I mean, obviously, when you have companies like this investing that kind of money, there's got to be something encouraging going on there.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are all kinds of things coming out. And I go to a lot of pitch competitions, and invariably at every business pitch competition, someone or multiple parties are pitching some sort of digital device that is geared directly at the medical profession or medical industry. Digital therapeutics, it is hot right now. And I really look at this one, perhaps maybe more than some of the other categories, Justin, as this just might be that category where someone gets into it. Maybe it's a passion. But maybe their passion is really, they just want to create something that a bigger company is going to gobble up. This industry is ripe for the little business, a small business, to create something new. And then a big company comes along and says, I want that, and buys it up, snatches it up right away.
Yeah. Well, and for so long, healthcare, I think, felt like to a lot of people from a user-friendly, from a customizable standpoint, it felt like it was kind of dragging behind a lot of other industries.
Mm-hmm.
There were all these other places where you could get more modern, more streamlined assistance, more self-help kind of things. And healthcare was just not one of those, or it didn't feel like it was, right? Maybe it was, but there wasn't much effort put into the branding and ease of entry side of things. And now that's part of, I'm sure, why it's exploding, is because healthcare is the one thing, right? One of those very few things that we all as humans pretty much have in common at some point or other in our lives. So it's always been, at least for the modern age, it's always been a big industry all by itself. So this is an opportunity to build off of an existing industry, which is, I think, a lot of what we see right now with startups is they're not necessarily creating new categories as much as they are simplifying or improving existing categories.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
or augmenting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And kind of a relative story to that. Someone I know recently had an eye exam, and the optometrist was present strictly digitally, was not in the room. It was all done digitally. So, and we'll see more and more of that as well. There are certainly many aspects to medical, or the provision of medical services, where it's not really necessary for someone to be physically present anymore, because there are so many capabilities. So we're going to see a whole lot more to come.
Shameless self-plug, actually, because as you were talking about that, it made me think the State of Us, the primary podcast that I host on TrueChat, has extensively covered rural health and some of the challenges that people in rural communities are increasingly facing issues with access to quality care. And in covering that, we actually had Jamie Hausman, the president of Mercy Health Urbana Hospital, on the program, which is our local hospital here in Urbana, to talk about, and she's only been there a year and a half, 2 years now, the new Da Vinci robot that they have, which is a surgical robot that allows surgeons at Ohio State University to perform procedures remotely here at our hospital. It's increased, almost doubled the amount of surgeries on a daily and weekly basis that the hospital can perform, and greatly increased the quality care available, not just the type of care. So that's one of those areas where, there's a number of people out there, I think, who are hesitant to embrace technology or question how much good tech does. But for small communities like ours, some of that stuff's absolutely essential because it expands the services available and the quality of services available without you having to drive an hour to get to where you need to be. And an hour is really not that much because we've done coverage of, there's a lot of places in the country where the nearest hospital is 2 hours away, or 200 miles away. And so then you're looking at making some of those decisions that you hope people don't have to make, which is, am I even going to make it? Can I even get there in time to get the kind of care I need? Mm-hmm. So it's certainly, this one's not just an interesting field to cover. I think it's also one that is essential to making sure that we don't leave small communities behind because they don't have access to the type of care that people in today's age expect.
Absolutely. All right. Hey, this is a really good time for us to remind our listeners that, you mentioned State of Us. All of the podcasts here at the TrueChat Network really have a common mission, and that's to inform and educate our listeners through respectful conversations like the one we're having right here. And we would like to invite you to join the discussion, if you would, please. Go out and find us on social media. You can find us at TrueChat@org. That's TrueChat.org. And let's hear from you. Let's hear what you think. And let's talk about some things. All right. So let's get back into the topic at hand here. We're talking about small business startup trends for 2019. We've talked about a couple of wide open industries, I should say. Let's talk about a third one. And that is CBD products. Mm-hmm. So these are the chemical components of cannabis and hemp that is, unfortunately for some of you, the non-psychotropic stuff. So in other words, you're not going to get high from CBD products, but they are extracted out of your good old pot. So sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying this is another one kind of like the healthcare that I think is it's good to see it expanding, because I think part of, and personally speaking, part of the stigma I know that I had behind legalization of, marijuana, for example, was, okay, but do we really want, the population, including those who are using it for medical purposes, to be running around high all the time?
Mm-hmm.
And I think what this seeks to do is to address that component of it by saying, well, there is a way, right, to get a lot of the positive benefits without some of the side effects.
Yes. Yeah, this promotes the health benefits. This is a health benefit part without the getting you high part. And it is kind of interesting. My dad has been confined to a wheelchair for a number of years. He, without going into a lot of the health history, easy for me to say,
yeah,
health history.
Say that fast.
Yeah, he's got a lot of really painful nerve damage in his feet, and everybody says, "Was that diabetes?" No, it wasn't from diabetes. Other stuff that happened to him, but really, really painful nerve damage that really disables him from walking. So he's confined to a wheelchair. And years ago, this was before the opioid crisis in the United States really became prevalent. I saw this study that found that smoking pot helped alleviate the specific type of nerve pain and nerve damage that he had, where the popular treatment was opioids.
Mm-hmm.
And that, opioids are great for a limited period of time, but they really stop being impactful in terms of pain management after a while. Your body just kind of gets used to it, and then it starts to need it for different reasons. And so that's part of what creates our crisis that we have right now. But when I saw that study, I went to my dad, who's old school. He's very old school, right? And said, Dad, maybe you ought to put those pills away and find yourself a pot dealer, and start smoking some pot. And of course, his response was, I'm not going to smoke that dope, that dope, he calls it that dope. But meanwhile, he's taking 11, pills a day that are way, way more potent than any pot he could have possibly gotten his hands on.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a few years ago. And now, we are understanding and recognizing this even more. And so a lot going on in this industry. There's a lot going on in the legalization or decriminalization of pot in general.
Correct. Yes.
But this is something different. This is CBD. This is that this won't get you high.
Right. And that's part of the challenge. I mean, we face that all the time on The State of Us, and that's part of what that program's about. And I know Jon tries to do a good job too of making sure that people have the base information they need, because there's so much out there on things like this that it can sometimes be hard to know what to trust and what not to trust, or just understanding it. And this is, again, something that we did cover recently, making sure that people understood what CBD was and how it was different than just, for example, recreational use of marijuana.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's important. And it's an interesting industry to keep following too as it evolves. And I'm sure as more of it becomes widely available.
Yep.
Personalized nutrition.
Yeah, sure.
I have experience with this one, both on the business end and on the consumer end. So it's a lot more complicated, I think, than people. If you're looking at it from a business standpoint, the food industry, right, all by itself, is very low margin typically. And that's not to say that you can't make good money doing it, but it's to say that you're not working typically with a lot of wiggle room. And when you get into personalizing things, the more options you create, right, the more difficult some of that can be. At the same time, if you can do it on the right scale and scope, when we say personalized nutrition, there's probably some brand type names that come to mind for people, then maybe it becomes more feasible. And I know this is bigger than just, some of the more specific examples that might come to mind, including things like, and this one caught my eye, an app called Food Therapy, which allows users to get answers to their nutrition and health questions from registered dietitians and certified nutritionists within 5 minutes. So that's like a completely different end of it, right? I mean, they've eliminated some of the, like we're providing you a physical product, right? And we're providing a service that to me seems like that would be great to have access to. You need a quick answer to something and boom, you can get it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And it is one of those industries where there are lots of basically turnkey opportunities for individuals that want to just augment their income, do some things on the side, or even make it full-time. There are lots of reputable companies. There are a lot of fly-by-night outfits out there as well, but there are a lot of reputable companies out there that offer basically turnkey businesses for you to think about. So check that out. I think we're just going to see more and more opportunity in this particular industry, just because we're getting smarter about our nutritional needs and the choices that we make. We're smarter about it, but the choices are still not as available and convenient to us.
And is consistent. I mean, one of the big things that comes to mind here, much like with cannabis, is so much misinformation. And I think just not even misinformation is confusion, right?
Mm-hmm.
We hear all kinds of conflicting things, or we feel like that's what we're hearing. 20 years ago, it was avoid fat at all costs, right?
Yeah.
You don't want, if food has fat, it's bad. And now, of course, we know that's not true. It has a lot to do with the type of fat and, to what extent you have it. So some of that, I think, has caused confusion. And part of what I hope comes out of this is better information that's more consistent. And as Jon said, I think as it evolves, we'll continue to get options that make more sense to people and for people on a more individual level.
Yep. Hey, let's rattle through these next four, unless there's one that you want to slow down on. I'm just going to mention them, and then if there are
the
any,
very
you want to go
last
back.
one.
Okay, so the last one will. But in the meantime, I'll just mention the next ones. So the next one actually makes me laugh a little bit. Healthy jerky. Healthy jerky is apparently a big business industry opportunity for the budding entrepreneur. So get out there and get you some healthy jerky and figure out how to make it.
I love it. I'm all for some help. I've always been a fan of jerky, despite that it hasn't always been the healthiest option. So if there's a way to make it healthy and still taste good, let's do it.
Yeah. Oh,
bring on the jerky.
Speaking of my old school dad, he makes his own jerky.
Oh yeah.
So, yeah.
Oh.
So, but I can't see him ever trying to sell it.
No.
So there you go. Baby tech is a big industry, big hot industry. Will continue to be technology in general. So this is just kind of niching down on baby technology, any technology around infants or in your parenting of infants will continue to be a trend, especially because, today's parents of newborns have grown up with technology. They're not afraid to apply it to any aspect of their life. And so this is a big one. All right. So moving down, selfie services. Man, boy, there have been a lot of people falling off towers and things here lately. I don't know if you've seen the news, falling off cliffs and whatnot. It's tragic. And it's people being not too bright about what they're doing, but selfies, of course. So anything you can do to enhance the selfie taking industry and make it more safe is going to be a hot item. All right. So what else we have, Justin?
Work leisure apparel. So this is I think the best way to describe it is an evolution of athleisure wear.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad, Jon. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
One of the stigmas, or I guess stereotypes, that is applied, I think, to millennials is, that all they can do is show up to work, right, in sweatpants and a t-shirt, and that's their idea of work apparel. Now, I do honestly feel that that's shifted some.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think there's also been an evolution of, for example, the stereotype that, men have no style, right?
Right.
And women are the ones who know how to dress. I think that's also changed some with my generation. I think there's a lot more men today that try to be more conscious of that than they used to be. And I'm glad to see that work leisure apparel is becoming a consideration. I was never big to advocate going crazy too casual, TrueChat is not a particularly formal environment by any means, but at the same time, I think this is looking to make work apparel comfortable, practical, while also avoiding it being too, I don't know. I think you know what I'm getting at,
Yep.
but sometimes the problem with casual clothing is it can send the wrong vibe in the wrong situation. So hopefully, the only reason I wanted to stop on this is I'm hoping that it becomes that it evolves to the point where we find that happy medium, the new business casual, put it that way.
Yeah, because it, one of the problems with casual workwear has been that it's very easy to look too casual or even risque. And so it's been a tough line for HR departments to draw and to figure out, what is our policy on dress? We can't just let it be wear anything you want. But we don't want to be, too stuffy about it. And it's been a real challenge. And I myself, when I'm old enough that when my career started, we were still in suits and ties, right? I had so many suits in my closet, and I actually loved it. I'm one of those weird people that I prefer to either be totally dressed up or totally trashed out.
You and me both.
I don't like the in between. And when business casual came into style and business formal went out the door, my immediate feeling about it was, everybody went out and bought their khakis and their polo shirts and whatever. And I felt like we all just looked like shoe salesmen.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it. Shoe salesman. Not that there's anything wrong with shoe salesman, right?
But you don't want everybody being a shoe.
No.
So, or the old State Farm commercial. What's she wearing? Khakis.
Yeah.
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 So I just don't. I'm not comfortable in that look. I'm just not. No. So I like I said, either be totally casual or totally dressed up. So I also applaud this as an industry. I would really like to see some great progress here. Get us something that we feel comfortable in, we feel good about ourselves in, but we're neither dressed down or dressed up.
Right. Yeah. It seems like with the improvements in all these other industries, there's got to be a way to get fashion because that's the biggest complaint, right? I've always heard of formal wear is, it's not comfortable,
Yeah.
And of course, one of the responses is, well, you must not have clothes that fit properly. But, it can be expensive too, right? If you're going to, especially in formal wear, if you're going to have everything fitted just so, that can get costly. And it becomes the kind of stuff where you're afraid to wear it anywhere other than very specific occasions. So hopefully this is that. Hopefully this is addressing that issue of making clothes that both fit and are comfortable, but can provide a professional enough look to be work acceptable.
Exactly. So there you go, all you people that are interested in the fashion industry. Lots of opportunity. So get out there and bring some solutions to Justin and me because we'd like to look a little better.
That's right. We're all for it. I like that. The picture there is encouraging. Maybe not a couple of them, but there's some options. So hopefully we see how that evolves.
Yep. Exactly. All right. Speaking of evolving, we've basically run out of time. We never really got into those other sources, which we thought was very possible. But I
love your segues. I just want to say that. I don't know if there's anybody else out there, but Jon Umstead segues are the best.
Well, thank you. But again, our sources, we've been actually looking at an article at Inc. online, 8 best industries for starting a business in 2019. A couple of other sources, The Balance, small business. You can look at the best small business opportunities for 2019, as well as The Street has an article entitled 24 Ideas for Your Next Small Business in 2019. And like we said at the outset, there is no shortage of other additional articles out there, people putting their 2 cents worth in there. But again, don't go out there and pick and choose. Hey, I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to start a business. Oh, this article says this one's a good one, so I'm going to do that. That's the wrong thing to do, wrong reason to use these articles. Use these articles to help vet your ideas and brainstorm some ideas, but do something that you're passionate about. Hey, quiz time, Justin. And you don't have to answer this. If you had it all to do all over again, and we're going to pick any type of business that you were going to enter into as an entrepreneur, what might it be?
Well, if I can also choose any time to start that business, John, then there's several that I would be thrilled to go back and get entered into correctly. That's a tough one. I'm certainly happy with TrueChat, but I also know that when we started it was an interesting time for the podcast industry. Wasn't much of an industry at the time. It's different now. Might be something though in the food service area. And I know I was kind of bashing on that before, but as far as food delivery service goes, had a brief foray into it. But I think it's, too little too late, right? There's already big players out there. That would probably be one that I'd go back and try to make a play for.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, I think there are a lot of people. I think I would, from an opportunity point of view, less so passion. I think I would probably look at anything whatsoever in the health industry. Because there's just no shortage of things that you can do and make a career out of, and that sort of thing. Just for a passion, I've said probably multiple times on this podcast that one of the last professions I would go into is the restaurant industry. Because I've seen it up close and personal. Boy, this is the show I'm referencing my dad a lot, but he had a bar and grill for about 10 years, and it is a lot of hard work. But I've also really come to appreciate that perhaps it was a lot of hard work, or a lot more hard work than it needed to be, I guess I should say, because he had no experience in that industry.
Right.
No training.
Makes it real tough.
Yeah. So I think maybe if I was younger, I love to cook, so I think like you, I might consider something in the food industry. Yeah. But I would approach it not as someone who just likes to cook at home in the kitchen and enjoys good food, but as someone that was truly passionate about providing, putting smiles on people's faces, knowing that you gave them something good and something that was nutritional. And I would seek out some training and education around it first.
Agreed. So it's an important component, especially for that industry. I think that's one that people underestimate. You either have to have a lot of practical experience, or you need to get, preferably both, the educational background for it as well. Because I think people think, oh, well, you don't need an education to be a good chef, and it's or to be a good restaurant owner, or whatever. And while you don't necessarily, there's certainly a lot of things you could do that would make it easier on yourself.
Yep, for sure. All right, we're going to have to wrap up, but let's close with this. Let's close by saying, hey, there are lots of opportunities out there for budding entrepreneurs, somebody thinking about starting up a business. Explore the options, but whatever you land on, be passionate about it. And we want to leave you with this final trend. There is a trend going on right now that I would love to see more of, and that is that 1 in 6 entrepreneurs are now actively seeking help from business coaches. They're understanding, speaking of that training and education, they are understanding more so now than perhaps ever that, hey, just because I've got a great idea, or I'm really good at something, that does not mean I'm necessarily going to be good about starting a business that is central to it. So think about that.
Yep. It's good to hear. Hopefully we report back on that in a year or two and it's moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
Right? It's getting higher.
So that's the good news. You know what the bad news is?
What?
Only 1 in 6 entrepreneurs are actually doing it. So let's get those
Fair
numbers
enough.
up.
Fair enough. It's the good news and the bad news.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So that's going to be a wrap for this episode of Business is Art. Thank you very much for tuning in. Justin, thanks for sitting in.
Always a pleasure.
All right, folks. Catch you next time on Business is Art. Be the change.